welcome to another T.A.R.A. Sessions. Today, my guest is Linda Miller, the CEO and founder of Misty River Introductions?
Right.
Yes, Misty River Introductions. She founded the agency about 30 years ago, and she services most of Ontario and the west side of Quebec. And she's here to talk to us about being a professional matchmaker. And I have so many questions and I'm so excited. So we were just chatting a little bit and telling you about my background. And so I was married for a long time and then divorced for about 3 now. And so a lot of my girlfriends have been, you should get back out there. You should, if you thought about dating or meeting somebody, and I'm like horrified at the idea. Yes. And I got drunk with a girlfriend and made a profile on a dating app. And I lasted like seven days. And I didn't like the way I felt when I was on it and stuff like that. So I was looking for other ways that people meet people when we were doing research for this Dance with Dating series. And I came across you and the work that you do. So tell me a little bit about Misty River. How did it come to be and what do you do?
Okay, so it's interesting you say that though, because a lot of people are so sort of turned off the online services and they come to me and they're very frustrated and they feel like, it's a lot of wasted time. And, I get online and I look at the clock, it's 5 o'clock. I look at the clock again, it's midnight. I got nowhere. Or, going on dates with people that are sort of serial daters and that kind of thing. Yeah. So we really do things very differently. You were asking me how I got started, and I had a dream that I was a matchmaker.
Love that.
And I told I have an identical twin sister, and I said, I had this dream that I was a matchmaker. And she said, oh, you'd be great at that. You're already good at that. You should do that as a business. And I told my parents, and they thought that was a great idea. And I was already good as a matchmaker. I was in college and I would match up, I'd go on a date with someone and I'd say, well, good news and bad news. I don't think you're for me, but I know somebody that it would be really amazing for you. And people would get married that I matched up. And I thought, I have obviously a knack for this. Okay. And I guess my subconscious was kind of calling out to me and I started the service and I started that actually out west. So I ran that out there for a few years and then it was sold. And it still operates very successfully under the name Camelot Introductions.
Okay.
And she's done a great job with it. And I moved out here in '95, started here, and have just never really looked back. Obviously, I was in a very good position at that time because I was married to someone who had an income, so I could do a sort of basically build a client base and not make any money for 2 or 3 years.
Because it's a startup company.
Yeah, you're really just, you're doing it for free for a long time. So then I got a critical mass and I was able to start matching people and it's been great. It's such a lovely thing to do for a living. I mean, you see changes for people and people really say to me, I never thought I would ever feel this way again. I never thought I was in love when I was 18 and I had that, feeling and butterflies in my stomach and excitement, and I never thought that would happen for me again. And here I am 65 or 70 and I'm having that feeling again, and I feel like, so excited about my life.
How rewarding is that work?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it makes it sound so much better than dating apps.
Well, one of the things we do is I spend a lot of time with people on the phone figuring out, we're sort of moved over to the phone or Zoom or FaceTime or those kind of things because, the virus is still out there. I have a large office employees. One of them is going through cancer treatment right now. So I don't want to bring anything into the office that's basically going to shut us down for a week.
Right.
And, or, hurt someone who I love who works with me. So I don't want to do that. And so I seem to be able to be just as successful doing it the way I'm doing it now. I'm not traveling as much, but we have a huge client base in Toronto and Kingston and Barrie and London and in Montreal. So it's worked out really, really well.
How wonderful. And it seemed, I have like so many questions running through my mind. So I'm going to try to slow my questions down so that we get as many as possible. But I do find this fascinating. And what I find fascinating is this is how it was done in so many cultures for hundreds of years.
And it's interesting you say that, because there's an Indian matchmaker show that's on right now.
Oh, is there?
And I love her because she says, she sits with the family, because they sit with the family. And sometimes I sit with families too, because people will bring their child or they'll bring their parents, and they'll sit in the process. If the person that's being matched is okay with that, I let that go on. And often the family has a different insight than the person that's being matched.
Right.
And so that's very interesting. But she's very funny, because she says 60-70%, that's what you get, because they give you a list, right, of all the things they need in a partner.
Okay. Oh my
And so it always makes me laugh, because I have that happen as well. And people that are like, okay, like you've got quite a laundry list here. Let's kind of break it down.
Let's break it down. Let's get to the core of what you really, really want, And it's in cultures like the Indian culture, like I've been in musicals, like I do a lot of community theater.
Oh, yeah.
And
Fiddler on the Roof?
Yes, exactly. So I was in Fiddler on the Roof, and that was working that script and going through it made me think, gosh, this would have been really interesting to live in a time where, as a woman, you were matched off by your family.
That's right.
And it's at the time I was like, oh, that doesn't sound very good. But now where I am, I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of nice. Having somebody else out there who knows you and knows what you would like and what you're looking for in a life partner, and out there looking for you. There's something so appealing about that.
Well, and I think those people have your best interests at heart. They want you to be happy. Mm-hmm. They know, what your core values are. They can really be a big part of the relationship having a successful, conclusion, because you want somebody who's going to mix well. Like people will say to me, my first language is French, but I'm okay with somebody English. But then what's going to happen when you take him back to your small town in Quebec and he can't understand a thing that's going on?
Right.
Or what about the nuances of language? So we look at all of that, but certainly having your family backing. And I think a lot of those, I know a lot of those relationships that are arranged marriages do work out. Mm-hmm. And so I do think it's really important that somebody mix well with your family.
Yeah, my sister was always a point of inspiration for me. She was a teacher, and she ended up finding her husband because she didn't want to date anybody from work. And I read through your material on your website, and you were saying that, where are your options to find people in life?
Right.
If you're not into the bar scene and partying and all that stuff, and you don't want to date anybody from work in case sometimes you just don't want to, or if you do, what if it goes wrong and then you're working with that person? Like there's so many other factors and variables. So she was the same. So she found her husband on eHarmony. And, this was, I don't know, they've probably been married, at least 15 years now, maybe 14, 15 years. And so back then it was still not really talked about the way that it is now. It wasn't quite taboo. It wasn't like a total stigma, but people were still shy about it and quiet about it, but not anymore. And so what are the differences you've seen over the decades in how people are dating and finding people?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was watching a clip of Drew Barrymore, and she was talking about hiring a matchmaker.
Right.
And I thought nobody would have, 20 or 30 years ago, nobody, and certainly not a celebrity, would be talking about hiring a matchmaker.
So true.
And she said, I just couldn't do the online thing, and having somebody that sort of knew me and sort of paved the way for me was really important to me, and I didn't want to spend hours. I wanted them to find people that were suitable and come back. But it was interesting listening to her, because I think she hired the millionaire matchmaker, and she said it was, in a way, it was sort of counterintuitive, because I don't care how much money somebody has. I want somebody who's creative and who's artistic and who, I value that. That's a real core value for me. So it was interesting that she hired somebody with millionaire in the title, but anyway.
Well, I mean, it brings up a good point too for me. Like, I'm hardly a celebrity, but I do have a public life. So as an artist, performing artist, and doing shows, and I live a big chunk of my life on social media and with my fans and stuff like that. So that was a big concern for me, because going on these dating apps, I was like, do I use my real name? Because there's a security, to me, there's a safety issue that comes to mind first with being on dating apps. Because if I use my real name, one Google search and you get like 10 pages.
Well, and that's,
right?
yeah, well, we have a facility for keeping people private.
Okay.
So we deal with a lot of very high profile people.
Right.
I mean, it's no secret Jeff Hunt did an ad for us on CTV.
Oh,
So,
did
yeah,
Jeff?
so
oh my God, our kids played hockey together.
Oh.
Such a
So
small
he
world.
used our service and is happily matched now.
So
So Jeff Hunt is a perfect example of someone who would come to us and we would not give out his information right off the bat. So we would match him with people, say, we have this person to tell you about. We'll give you a little bit of information. We'd give him the information first because he's the person who would most likely be not known.
Right.
He'd say, yes, it's somebody I don't know. I'd be interested in talking to her. And then we'd go back and give her the photos and the information. Because people are going to recognize his picture.
Exactly.
So the only sort of caveat on that is sometimes you get two people, they're case by case, they're both high profile in the community, so then you have to kind of finesse it a bit.
Right.
So you kind of give a little bit of information on both and say, listen, here's the situation. You know, maybe this person is, you know, a judge or something like that where it's, they don't want any information going out. Or maybe, you know, they're a doctor and they don't want to meet a patient, or even a teacher sometimes doesn't want to meet a parent of a student.
Yeah.
So we have to be a little bit careful.
Right.
And the people that are coming to us, one of the reasons they come to us is they are really private.
Right.
And they don't want their colleagues or their patients or their, you know, parents of students reading that, you know, they like long walks on the beach and that kind of thing. It's like, I want to be in more privacy. Yeah, and pina coladas.
Yeah, but it is such an important factor about, like, it's such an important service that you provide, I find, because, you know, it is difficult to meet people, you know, it is, if you're, depending on what your lifestyle is and what your career is, but
well, as you age.
And especially as you age.
Because your kids are no longer in soccer, so you're not meeting anybody on the soccer field. They're out of school, you're not meeting anybody at school. You're maybe like you and I, for instance, we're in businesses where the people we work with maybe work for us, or they're not going to be people that we're going to be dating.
Right.
It does make it very difficult. And even with the amount of effort we have to put into our jobs these days, there's not a lot of energy to go online or to go and join a club hoping that you might, you know, join a hiking club and meet a nice girl or a nice guy. It's much more difficult these days.
It is. And also the thing that I find too, I always joke that I would do really, really well like in the 1800s, right? When like a suitor was allowed to come to the parlor on Sunday and then you went on promenade with them. Like, because there was what I love about that is there was a very clear set of steps.
And expectations.
Yes. But now I find, well, with young people, you know, like kids just sort of, they find each other on Tinder or whatever, and they just hook up, and that's the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
Right? Where, like, that's not appealing to me on any level.
Well,
like,
and there's no checks and balances for behavior because someone can disappear you, and, you know, the Smiths aren't going to talk to the Joneses and say, you know, this suitor that Carol had, he disappeared her.
Right.
And the Joneses don't go, oh my gosh, well, we won't let him into the house because nobody knows it went on.
That's right.
And so there's just not that check.
That's right.
That goes on and with us it does, because it's like, sorry, but you're not going to get into the next parlor if you behave that way again.
Exactly.
So
you will not be invited to anybody else's house, and no promenading for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, but in just the sort of the evolution of courting, like we don't have a real set kind of, everybody agrees on this is what courting looks and feels like.
There is though.
There is? Please tell me what it is.
So there is in my service.
Okay.
And because I have high expectations, I want my clients to have expectations.
Right.
So I always feel like, you know, people will say, well, how does it go? Like I had this conversation this morning with someone, and I said, well, here's how it goes. So you talk briefly on the phone, not more than 15 minutes.
Okay.
Because people need to earn your time.
Right. I love that. People need to earn your time. So they have to show that they're worthy of your life minutes. I love that.
Yes. Well, and people will say to me, well, I talked to her for 3 hours last night. And I'm like, why did you do that? Mm-hmm. They've done nothing to earn your time. Right. And what you're saying is two things. You're saying, I don't have anything better to do than to sit on the phone with you. even though you've done nothing.
Right.
And you're giving away too much information.
Right.
So part of dating is being a bit mysterious.
Yes.
And having people work to get
That's right.
information from you.
Right.
And the other thing I say to people is when you go out for a meal you should be going out for a meal with somebody. You should not be meeting in a coffee shop.
Okay.
Coffee shops are cold. They set the temperature really low. They want you to get your coffee and get out.
Really?
Yeah. You should be meeting at a restaurant. So
Really?
if you're leading
Okay.
the conversation and after 15 minutes you say, you seem very nice, but for me it's a chemistry thing.
Yeah.
And people understand that. They want a spark. So
Yeah.
they go, oh, okay, well, let's get together. And then that's when you break in and say, I know a great Italian place. I've been meaning to try it. And you name the name of the restaurant. I can meet you there at 5:30. Then you have your date.
Okay.
And when the bill comes, if he picks up the bill, you let him.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
part of courting is feeding.
Okay, so you were talking about there is a courting process.
Mm-hmm.
So walk me through what that is with your company. So you're saying, a phone call first, and you were talking about how important it is to sort of curb your time or measure the time from the beginning.
I think I want to say that people they cast their movie. So when you give somebody a match, and you go, okay, here's, Joe, he's, 5'10", he's a doctor, he's, never married, these are the things he likes to do for his activities, he's got dark hair. Sometimes you get people that will talk on the phone too much.
Okay.
And they cast their movie with their leading man and in their head. And I've done this too.
Okay.
So you cast Joe in your head and then you meet Joe and you've read the book and there's no way that's who Joe's supposed to be.
Okay.
So it doesn't add up to who you imagined him to be in your head. So I always say to people, it's better to go in with zero expectations.
Right.
And then you can sort of build Joe out from there,
Right.
rather than go in with this preconceived notion that this is what Joe's going to be like when I meet him. Right. So if you go in and you spend 10 or 15 minutes on the phone with someone, he's got all the characteristics you're looking for. So you go in and then sort of start from there, rather than start from this sort of fantasy place
Right.
where you imagine somebody, but you
Right.
know that when you
Totally.
read a book and you go to see the movie and you go, I can't believe they put Tom Cruise in
It's
this
like
cast.
Jamie from Outlander. Did you read the Outlander books?
I did, and that guy is not my Jamie.
He's not my Jamie either.
No.
Love him. He's super handsome.
Yeah.
Amazing talent. Has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But my Jamie didn't look like
no,
that.
my Jamie was more like the other guy, the older guy.
Oh yeah, like the
That's
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I can't remember. Murdoch?
Yeah.
Yes, he was more gruff like that and taller for me too. Yeah.
And nothing like the Jamie they've cast. And the girl is not really as I imagined, but she's really grown on me.
Yes, yeah.
And he's actually grown on me. But yeah, so you have to be so careful about that.
Okay, so that makes so much sense.
Yes.
So when you're reading a profile, okay, so where in your process do you bring the visual element in?
So we do bring it in fairly quickly.
Okay.
So we want you to, like I always say to people, you can't tell if it's a yes, but you can tell if it's a hard no.
Okay.
So if we tell you about somebody and then we send you the picture and the profile,
Right.
you look at it and you go, okay, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe. Mm-hmm. Then it's worth having a conversation and it's worth maybe having a meeting.
Okay.
But if you look at it and go, there's no way I can kiss him, then you know that it's not going to work.
Exactly.
But you have to be so careful because, I think we've all had the experience where we maybe work somewhere and you meet somebody who's a colleague and you meet him 2 or 3 times and you hardly notice them the first few times.
Yeah.
And then over time, you get a total crush on him because he's got a great sense of humor, or he's very confident, or he's so interesting, or whatever.
Yeah.
Some switch happens in there. So you do have to be a little bit careful because sort of judging too soon. And if I have a dime for every person that's, gone on a date with somebody and said, oh, I'm not interested in him. Oh, why not? Well, he's never been married. I've been married and I want somebody who's been married, or they give you some reason they're not interested. And then a week later you haven't heard from them. So you give them a call and they say, oh, well, I'm kind of seeing Brad. Remember Brad? Well, Brad, the guy you weren't interested in
Yeah.
because he's never been married?
Oh, you're actively seeing him
Yeah,
now.
yeah. So that was a bit of a switch.
Yeah.
So it can happen.
It's so true that you say that, because like for somebody like me, I've never dated.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of boyfriends in high school, but that doesn't really count. And then I got pregnant when I was 18 and married the father of all my children. We were married for a long time, for 27 years. So because my girlfriends would say, well, what's your type? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, right? Because I never had that time in my life where I went right from living with my mom and dad and my family to having my own family. You know, so that time where you're with your girlfriends in college and you're out kind of, you know, at the bars and you're looking at other men or whatever and saying, oh, you know, he's pretty cute, or like, I never had that part of my life. So if I ask myself, you know, what's my type, or what do I find attractive? Like, I think, okay, well, if I'm in the grocery store in the mall and a man walks by, I think, oh, he's attractive. So I have some sense of, you know, what I find attractive, but I am very attracted to personalities.
Yes.
Like, I am more attracted to the person. So I already know that about myself, that the connection, I'm a spiritual person as well. So the connection with somebody for me far outweighs like the physical element of it, or
well,
I
I'm
can
like
see
that.
that.
Brains is like the sexiest thing.
That's right.
Like, I always say I want somebody smarter than me, and I'm pretty darn smart.
Yeah.
So I need you to be really, really smart.
Yeah.
And not in every way. I
Yeah.
don't expect somebody to be, you know, have knowledge in every field, but I want to be engaged intellectually.
Yeah, and just have great conversation about things things going on in the world, or things going on in your life. Like, somebody who really listens or makes space for me, I could see that being very attractive, because that is the one thing I was definitely missing in my relationship, was there was not a lot of space for me. There wasn't so I've never really had a relationship or a romantic relationship with somebody who actually would listen and hold space for me while I process thoughts, or just, you know, bounced ideas off, or that exchange. That just wasn't a dynamic in our relationship. So I already have an idea of what my very long checklist would be.
It's important that you do the work. Like, when people come to me, I'm always really impressed when somebody's done the work, because what people tend to do is, you're married to Brad and you bounce over to Ken, which is the exact opposite of Brad, but really you need to be sort of in Mike here, Mike in the middle. So some of the qualities of this guy and some of the qualities of this guy.
Yeah.
You don't want to throw everything away.
Right.
So if you've done that work and you've worked through what didn't work in this relationship, what did work, what was my role in it, how am I going to change, what am I going to do differently, then it's really, really easier for me. And you're in a happier place, and people that are happy tend to be more attractive.
It's true, yeah. And when you talk with people, because the other thing that has gone through my mind is, I hear people saying this to me, you know, you should get out there, you should find somebody, you should. And when sometimes I kind of get caught up in it, I think, okay, because I'm still fairly young, like I'm not even 50 yet. And, you know, should I? But then I think, I'm not lonely. Like, I'm not lonely. I love my life. Like, I love my life. And I love my work. I love what I do. And I love my life. And so right now, making space for a relationship in my life, it's not something that I would want to do, to really make space for a relationship. But going on a date here and there, so there's different levels, right? Like, it's not, for me, it's not about finding a life partner right now. But the one nagging thought that gets me is the growing old together. Is having that person when you're old, like, and to take care of each other. Right? Because because I wouldn't want to be a burden to my children. You know, like, these are the things that I start thinking about. And it's like, well, should I try to find that life partner now? You know, instead of when I'm 70 or 80. You know, but it's funny to me that it is a fear-based thought that I should be, which is rooted in fear, or, you know, the growing old thing that motivates me, which tells me that I'm not actively, from a heart space, seeking a relationship, like a true committed relationship right now.
Well, I think you're also, like a lot of people right now, they've had their families migrate back. So we've got all our COVID families, and I had my COVID family for a while there too. And it doesn't make you hungry for a relationship, because you got these sort of like people that are filling some of the need you have. And I say to people, like, I get also people that come to me that have this sort of, I hate to use this term, but sort of relationships of convenience, or, you know, like hookup sort of friends.
Right. Friends with benefits.
Friends with benefits, thank you. And I say you need to be, they say, well, that won't impact, you know, me meeting somebody. And yes, it will.
Oh, yes.
Because what it does is it makes you emotionally unavailable, because somebody in that relationship likes the other person more, or it wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you're getting some of your needs met. So it makes you lazy and complacent.
Okay.
And what you want is you want somebody who can give you everything.
Right.
And when I say everything, I don't mean everything.
Right.
But what I mean is that person is 100% committed to you.
Right.
And that's your person. They have your back. They, you know, they're that other part of you. And so you know, you have to be so careful, because we do make these kids our lives, and eventually they get up and go away, and then you're sitting there and you're going, here I am back again by myself. And I do want that. I do want to. And I had to say to myself, when my kids went off to university and did what, I wanted to be married again.
Right.
And so I looked at it like sort of like a part-time job, because I hate dating. So I would go, okay, so I'm going to go on a date tonight, and I'm going to pick somebody to go on a date, and I'm going to go on a date with them. And I was very picky and choosy, and I had to do some work too, because my son said to me, he said, oh, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm going on a date. He says, well, what, is this your first day? I said, no, that's my third date. And he said, oh, well, you know, you should be able to figure out pretty soon what's wrong with them then, because like, in other words, like, there's something wrong with everybody.
So, and he saw that in you,
yes.
that you were finding that.
And so I had to go, and I did a little bit of CBT, and I talked about, you know, what am I dragging along here? Why is there something wrong? Like, there's something wrong with everybody? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think maybe, and to some extent too, I was in a situation where I was unwilling to compromise. I had success in my own right. I didn't need somebody. I wanted somebody.
Yeah.
And so, but certainly I also needed to do a little bit of work on myself and say, you know, what's going on here?
I know who I am.